largest prayer and praise gathering. Join us on Praise the Lord from the Great Northwest as we bring you anointed pastors, evangelists, teachers, authors, and other special guests with testimonies and teaching to encourage and inspire, and music to glorify God as we lift up Jesus Christ as Lord.
Good morning. I'm Pastor Mark Biltz of El Shaddai Ministries. This morning, accompanying me is Pastor Art Palecek.
That's right.
That's right. And we are quite the duo here.
I would say so. Yeah, this is going to be, today is going to be one of the most, we've done a lot of programs here, but this is probably one of the most exciting that I think we probably have ever done, just because of the nature of the program and our guests. So those of you that are viewing, stay with us, because you will certainly enjoy the topics that we have today. Right?
Oh yes, our first guests are going to be Randy Neal with Christians United for Israel, and along with him is John Winchester, and he's the coordinator who goes on the college campuses to make sure that all the bias against Israel, I know you believe in media bias, it's pretty bad, and he just tries to counteract that on college campuses. But before we begin this exciting conversation, we want you to listen to a song actually written by Sarah Sanders, who helps with worship at El Shaddai Ministries. And her song is Shalu Shalom, which means to pray for the peace of Yerushalayim, Jerusalem. Sarah. So much, Sarah. That was fantastic. Shalu Shalom. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. And tell us, Randy Neal with Christians United for Israel, you just came back from Jerusalem. What was your trip like?
Yes, I did. It was just absolutely fabulous. But before we touch on that, I'd be remiss if I didn't take a moment and just I want to thank both Pastor Mark and Pastor Art for your friendship, for your leadership with Christians United for Israel. I don't know if you're viewing audience is aware that Pastor Mark just recently accepted our state directorship for the state of Washington, and we're just really excited about that. So thank you very much for taking that on. We're looking forward to great things up here in the Northwest. But you're absolutely right. We brought 32 pastors to Israel, most of them for their very first time. A lot of them were folks that you might call on the fencers. They came at the behesting of friends and peers that thought that they should do it, and they made it clear. A lot of them made it pretty clear that they weren't sure why other people took it as such a serious issue. And you could just see the epiphanies, you could see the revelations, you could see the light bulbs going off over their heads. And
so this was their first trip to Israel for most of them.
It was their first trip.
Typically, when pastors spend so much time teaching from the Bible, and may never leave the States to go to Israel. And I know the first time, of course, that I was in Israel, I know Pastor Mark as well, not only do you see the landscape, excuse me, of the land, but as you mentioned, the epiphanies that happen, the things that come to your mind when you're in the land. Can you talk about anything that you saw with any of these pastors that changed their thinking? Where their lights came on.
Absolutely. And it's funny that you should say what you just did, Pastor, because a lot of them, that's exactly the terms that they use, that they used to teach and preach a certain way. And a number of them, we did a wrap-up dinner at the end, and everyone had a chance to share. And a lot of them said, I'm going to have to go back and change the way I preach on Israel, and change the way I read the Bible on Israel, and change the way I look and view it. The epiphanies, of course, were, you take a man that's very accustomed to preaching and speaking in front of perhaps thousands of people, and you put them on the Mount of Olives in front of 29 other pastors, and all of a sudden it's a pretty humbling experience. And they each had a chance to share the word at some of the most significant holy sites. But the epiphanies that I thought were as important were when a pastor would be down on the Lebanon border in a kiwi field, and he'd realize that the people that worked that field, he has to walk longer to his mailbox than the Hezbollah opium poppy fields are from where he is standing. And so that was a different kind of revelation that they weren't expecting. And so they came back with a greater appreciation for what God's Word says about Israel, God's love and plan and purpose for Israel and the Jewish people, but also about Israel as the state, as a member of the international community, and the tireless lengths they go to be an upstanding citizen of the international community.
Just this past week, I brought a globe that I had from home to our office at El Shaddai. And my wife was with me, and I spun the globe around, and I hadn't looked at this one before, and I said, honey, I don't even think Israel is on this globe. I can't see it. And she points and she goes, oh, there it is right there. And we think about Israel being such a small country, the people putting up with the challenges that they put on the land, and yet the global events revolve around what happens in this small country. When you were there, and it seems that every time someone leads a trip to Israel, there's something that happens when you're there that's very significant. Did you have anything like that happen? Like, for example, rockets flying over your head, or F-16s, or...
Well, when we had the trip on the books and people were registering to attend the trip, that was right in the throes of Operation Pillar of Defense. And so pastors, and as importantly, pastors' wives that were about ready to send their husband off to the Middle East were watching on CNN and on the news some events unfolding that really might make a man that had little faith wring their hands a little bit. But I was encouraged to see that as those things unfolded, we actually had a spike of pastors asking to go, calling up and sending emails asking, I really want to go right now, because they could see that Israel needed the moral support. They wanted to express solidarity. It wasn't a reckless expression of faith. It was an urgent time of need, and they wanted to do whatever they could.
How often do you take pastors? If there's any pastors that are watching this program right now and they're interested in going with Israel, maybe they want to go with you, how often does Christian United for Israel lead a trip?
Well, it increases every year. 2 years ago, we did 1. A year ago, we did 2. This year, I believe we're doing 6. And as we identify people that are able to provide the resources for us to give this experience to pastors, then we will continue to do it. I'll be doing 2 in 2013. I just came back from one a couple of weeks ago, so I'll throw out a couple of appeals to your viewers. You know, if you would like to sow into the hearts of pastors, and you think that you have a financial gift that could be life-changing for this man of God, then we steward every penny as effectively as possible. And then I'll throw this other out to the pastors that are viewing. If you've never gone to Israel and you think that you'd like to take it up a notch and you'd like to see how your service and ministry could more tangibly and effectively minister and bless the state of Israel and the Jewish people, then let us know. And you know, when we have a trip coming from your region, we'll do what we can to make sure that you are part of it.
Tell me this: why should pastors support Israel?
Well, it's pretty rhetorical coming from you, Pastor Mark. You know, I don't want to be tongue-in-cheek over simple about that, but you know, we have a pretty basic belief that if you're going to call yourself a Christian, then it's, you know, pretty safe to say you better love what God loves.
Yes.
And my Bible, from Genesis to Revelation, has a pretty continuing theme that He loves Israel and the Jewish people. Now, He will, you know, make a spectacle out of them occasionally to reveal and glorify Himself if necessary. But He has plans and purposes that are in His sovereignty and in His mysteries, slightly above my pay grade in a couple of areas. But He's, you know, it's pretty clear. We've seen some things unfold in recent time that have been foretold, and I think that we better pay very close attention about, you know, one day we're going to have to give an account about what we did, about what we knew.
That's right.
And unless you are, you know, unless you unsubscribe to the paper and turn off your cable television, you know, there's a lot of things unfolding in the Middle East right now, and Israel needs a friend, and the real only friend that she has in the world is America, and the Christian community is the backbone of that friendship.
Yes,
I think so.
You know, he just mentioned, he talked about, interesting comment about the pastors didn't just go with a reckless expression of faith. And it becomes very sobering. You know, here you are sharing from the Bible, and then you get on the same ground that King David fought battles, that Goliath was on, that the prophets were, you know, the same land that Abraham and Isaac and Jacob walked. And in light of America, where we're very sheltered, and then you get to Israel, it changes your whole perspective. But it makes you a part of history. How may have it changed some of the pastors in that light? And as far as being a dual question here, being with Christians United for Israel, your mission when you go to Israel is not to convert or anything, it's to show solidarity with the Israel people. If you have any examples about that as well.
Yes, let me answer your last question first, because there are people watching their TVs right now that when you said our mission's not to convert, they gasped out loud, and you know, let's put a disclaimer. Let's make sure that we make that really clear. We're an evangelical Christian organization. You've got a couple of Jewish, you know, guests that are going to be on the segment following us. They don't need to be a rocket scientist to figure out what we believe. They know that we believe Jesus is the Messiah, and we don't make a secret about that. We don't make an apology for that. The caveat to that is that we don't demand that they agree with us theologically before we're going to commit to stand with them unwaveringly. And that goes for especially when their enemies are on the march, and their enemies are on the march. And so, you know, with that said, we don't go with the mission to convert, you know, the people that we encounter. We go to really equip the pastors that are visiting the Holy Land, and to let them not just, you know, see what happened 2,000 years ago, but to let them see what happened last week and what could happen next week.
Yeah, contemporary.
You know, as fabulous as it was to be in the Garden of Gethsemane or on the Mount of Olives or on the beach of the Galilee, some of these men had their greatest epiphanies when they were listening to a Palestinian journalist speaking very objectively and making the case that Israel isn't all that the mainstream media casts her to be, or listening to a young IDF soldier who at 18 or 20 is responsible for the lives of dozens of young men, and realizing how close her enemies are on the borders. So they came back with a great appreciation for God's love for Israel, and a great conviction of standing as a bulwark against the onslaught of anti-Zionism, anti-Israel rhetoric that we see, because that really is, if truth be told, that really is is anti-Semitism.
Sure.
But if you veil it as anti-Israelism, then it's politically correct. And on college campuses, which you're going to hear about in a moment from John Winchester, on college campuses, if you veil your anti-Semitism as anti-Israelism, it's not just politically correct, it's downright chic, it's downright fashionable.
Well, tell us about John.
John Winchester is, I love this young man. We work in pretty much the same region, everything left of Nebraska. And in 2008, Christians United for Israel launched our Christians United for Israel on Campus campaign. I don't know if both of you know this. Many of your viewers may not. But when we first met several years ago, our organization had fewer than 50,000 members. And as we're sitting here today, we have over 1,200,000 members.
Wow,
nationwide,
fantastic.
the largest pro-Israel organization
That's
in the country. And I would say one of the most significant cornerstones of the mission is our work on college campuses. And CUFI on campus, shared with John Winchester and his counterpart in the East, is doing a fabulous, fabulous job. Before I hand him the mic, I want to sing his praises. That you know, when we started, we were wondering, these students are going to be stepping up into something that is religious and political and very unpopular, and we didn't know how many people would want to carry the flag. And this man has to run to keep up with the just absolute creme de la creme of young men and women leadership that are willing to take the hill and are willing to stand for this cause. So, John?
Hi, good morning. I'm glad to be here. I'm fortunate to have, I'm from Arizona, so I'm fortunate to have come into the organization via Randy Neal and the work that he's done. I've learned a lot from him on how to go about my work. But Christians United for Israel's campus division, the CUFI on campus, is really, it's a two-pronged approach. We're really doing two things. One is preparing leadership in the country.
That's right.
That's going to be in the next 10 to 15 years. But not just national leadership, but state leadership, city leadership, and home leadership. And we're bringing up, there's a generation, my generation is coming to school. We don't have, largely speaking, we don't have a worldview. Haven't been taught very well. And there's a lot of blank slates going into college campuses and universities around not being educated very well within their own households.
That's right.
And what CUFI has taken upon themselves to do, working with pastors like yourselves all over the country, is to bring that level of education back into my generation so that they can turn around and hand it to their children and their children's children.
You know, that's so interesting because of course, the colleges are the pulse beat of America. That's where our future leaders are coming from.
That's right.
So many college students, of course, they come from some type of a religious background, have had Sunday school or teaching from the Bible, and yet by the time they get to the college campus, and you probably have better statistics as to how their faith has changed by the time they get to college.
Pew Research
in understanding Israel, you could probably comment on that better as to where they're coming from.
Absolutely. Pew Research has done a poll on the millennial generation. That's anyone from 18 to 29 years old, and a full quarter of my generation does not identify with any religious value whatsoever. They identify with irreligious or atheist. And 80% of my generation or more, no, closer to 90%, 87%, came from a religious background. But yet 25% of them has turned their back completely. Only 4% of my generation has religion or religious pursuance as a goal, a high goal in their life. 4%.
That's incredible.
Let me inject just an underscore in what John is saying. If you take a poll right now amongst the non-student population of the United States, it's going to weigh, and you ask them, do you think the U.S. should be for and with or against Israel? Right now, the poll shows that about 76 to 78% of the U.S. population off campus believes that we need to maintain strong U.S.-Israel relations. You take that same poll on a college campus, it drops to 32%. Now, those young men and women are tomorrow's senators and congressmen.
That's right, and leaders of the community as well.
That's right.
And in their businesses and their homes and so on.
So that's the first approach of CUFI on campus. But the other approach is this. They are fighting the current battle right now. the battles are not, largely speaking, in your grocery stores. They're not in your town centers. It's on the university campus. So we're fighting, raising them up to be good leaders, but we're also equipping and giving them the tools to fight the battle that's happening right now. So that's CUFI on Campus's approach. And my job is to bring the resources that students need to be able to fight that battle, but also to equip them to become better individuals.
Well, when you say fight that battle, what battle are you talking about? I mean, are you talking about being educated about Israel? Is that the battle you're talking about, or something more in general?
Well, on campus, you have institutionalized anti-Israel sentiment. And when I did my master's program in Middle Eastern Studies, just as an example, I had to take Arabic. And when you get into Arabic, there's only one program at the moment. It's called Al-Kitab, the book. There's the only Arabic language program in the country. In the map section of that book, there is only Palestine. There is not Israel on the map at all. So the idea is to educate Israel out of the books of the system.
So there's no propaganda on college campus.
No, not at all. Not at all. So that's one format. So teachers in the school system is bent largely, not completely, but largely against Israel as a nation, as a Jewish state, and seeks to delegitimize and eventually destroy her very existence. And then you have all of the other things that happen on campus, whether there be protests against Israel, op-eds in the newspaper, anti-Israel events that are going on campus. We have what's called Apartheid Week, which is coming up here very quickly in March, where campuses across the country will put up mock walls like the Berlin Wall and call Israel a racist state, and put this up in their green areas, their common areas, quads, and and hand out literature that describes Israel as being this kind of vicious people, and her army as a murdering institution like the Nazis.
Horrible. You going to say something, Randy?
Yeah, I just, I think it's important. People are getting a glimpse of John's passion, his conviction, and his, his authority as well when it comes to this issue. And we literally have, I don't want to give the impression that we are opposing any critics of Israel. That's not our mission. We're not out to mute the critics of Israel or to dismantle college chapters, that are not like-minded. We're out simply to level the playing field so that Israel is fairly and accurately portrayed on those college campuses. This young man, he had no interest in going to Washington, D.C. We have a Washington, D.C. summit every July, and there's a significant program for college students, much of whom are scholarshiped to go to D.C. to be introduced and to get a critical thinking filter installed so that when they come back to their campus, they are inoculated against the anti-Israel propaganda that they are inundated with. But this man, he didn't want to go to another, Christian conference. He didn't want to, he thought he had preconceived notions of what it was going to involve, but it was his pastor that said, John, I think you need to go to this. I'm talking to the pastors watching the show. I'm talking to the lay leaders watching this program, that of that overachieving, responsible beyond their years, college-age student that deserves a break, that deserves to be nominated for a scholarship to go to D.C., where they can go and have a life-changing, history-shaping experience and come back with the tools and the resources and the support to actually go ahead and start that work to level that playing field on their college campus. I think there's a number at the bottom of the screen. If they call it, then you'll be given the information to get a hold of CUFI. And we make it very easy to nominate those overachieving students like John was. John had other plans. It wasn't to come on staff with CUFI, but he's learned the way I did that we call him Jehovah Sneaky sometimes because he's got plans and appointments for us that we didn't put in our calendar, and so just appeal that we've got scholarships to send students to DC. And they can work with John if they're in the West and his counterpart if they're in the East and really make a relevant impact to level that playing field.
Well, one thing that I was talking to John a little bit, he was saying it's really hard in the state of Washington, I don't know about the other states around Washington, as far as getting on the college campuses, or they give them a hard time. If there's any college students that are watching, they could call TBN, find out, and they might love to have you fight some of the media bias against Israel. Would you recommend people that they know schools to call you?
Absolutely. I mean, if you are watching this program, grab your college-aged son, grandson, neighbor, whatever. Have them watch. Have them give me a call. The station will give you my contact information. And Christians United for Israel, we've gotten pretty good at this. And we have the ability to help where there is a problem. But you're right, Pastor. State of Washington remains the only state where I have actually heard fear in the voice of students to want to be pro-Israel on their college campus.
Wow.
It's the only state I've had where I've had to sit down with students and they said, you don't know what it's like to be on a campus here. And I don't. I don't. But we can help. And it will require spine stiffening to step out and see and do what the Lord wants. It's never going to be easy. You know, but we're here to help.
There was a famous quote by someone on everybody wants 15 minutes of fame. Everybody has their 15 minutes of fame. And yourself, and of course Randy, Pastor Mark, and myself, we walked the halls of the U.S. Capitol and the other buildings and met with senators and congressmen. And just talk briefly the impact that had on you, meeting with the leaders of our country, and then bringing that back to students or having students with you to see how they can become a part of history and change the tide of unbelief towards God's people who are in Israel.
The first year that we went to D.C., about 3,600 people. The second year that we went to D.C., about 4,000 people. Quite frankly and respectfully to our elected officials, you know, evangelical Christians, for some reason, they don't seem to put on the priority list of paying attention to. But when we started the student program and made those students the captains of the talking points, when we met with our senators and we met with our congressional reps, they saw that, and that changed everything. When they saw that we were raising up the Joshua generation that passed that baton to, they realized that not only are we coming back, we're not going away. And,
all right.
And now they look forward to us coming. And John and I just went to D.C. last week with about 400 other Christian leaders. And
how did that go?
It was absolutely amazing to see the way that we were received. It was regarding the nomination of a would-be Secretary of Defense. And we shared our concerns about that individual and from a Christian perspective. And it looks like our elected officials are taking our concerns seriously to vet them to a greater degree than they had originally planned.
Well, that's amazing. You know, when I think it's Chuck Hagel who's supposed to be the new defense secretary. I was reading one report where he felt like the Israelis kept the Palestinians like in jailed animals or animals in cages, and that's hard to believe that people of in that kind of position would make comments like that. But right now what we need to do, we're going to go to another song by Sarah Sanders, and the song is called Desert Song.
This
because of the camera. It's so good to have Sarah with us singing these songs, and it's so good to have you watching us here on Trinity Broadcasting Network. I'm Pastor Mark Biltz. This is Pastor Art Palecek of El Shaddai Ministries, and we would love to have you come and visit us sometime.
Yes.
But right now, I have two very exciting guests. I can hardly wait for you to meet. One of them is Rob Jacobs, who I totally admire. I just think he is one fantastic guy. He's with the Jewish organization called Stand With Us, Northwest, as far as for this area, and he's the one who's fighting the battles on the front lines. If you remember the Seattle bus ads a year or so ago when they were trying to put out these very anti-Israel ads on the buses, he's the one that spearheaded in getting those removed or not being allowed to be on. And we're so thankful for Rob Jacobs with Stand With Us and everything he's doing for the Jewish community. Let's give Rob a big hand. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a mutual admiration society. We have a mutual admiration society here because I'm always in awe of what you're able to do with people and how you get them to come to love Israel. And it's just very powerful. And the times we've come down and visited you, just spectacular. It's been so re-energizing for us and for our speakers.
Well, thank you, thank you. So, Rob, after listening to John Winchester, talking about how students are afraid to support Israel on campus here in Washington State, that made me wonder, my goodness, here we have students afraid on campuses in Israel. So tell us a little bit about Chen Mazzig, the new Shaliach from Israel. I know he had an experience right here on one of our campuses in Washington State, and have him tell us about it.
Okay, let me first tell you a little bit about Chen and why we have at Stand With Us the Shaliach program, the Israeli emissary program. We found, as you've said, that on so many campuses, students are reticent to stand up and speak out in support of Israel. Sadly, so many students are not reticent to stand up and say things negative about Israel because on campus they hear a constant drumbeat of negativity about Israel these days. And it's misrepresentations, and it is one-sided. And as you just heard, polls show that it's almost a mirror reflection of American support for Israel, where there's such strong support for Israel in the general American community. When you get onto campuses, you get almost the opposite. Wow. And so part of what we found is that we really needed to get people onto campus who were Israelis in large part because they, by their own presence and by their own personality and by the things that they're able to talk about, are able to counter the misrepresentations. They're able to inoculate students. Good. And so for the last 3 years, we've had a Shaliach program where we bring a young Israeli who has had Israeli Defense Forces, IDF experience, to come and reach out to the community and to campuses. And Chen Mazzig is this year's Shaliach in the Pacific Northwest. And it's really been an honor to work with Chen for the last 3 or 4 weeks since he arrived. I think you'll see that he's a really interesting and energetic young man who's a really good representation of Israel and the Israeli generation that has, as with every generation, worked hard to protect the Israeli community from attacks and from the pressure to both terrorism and previously in wars. Chen had a really interesting experience in that his primary focus, and he'll tell you about it, was to reach out to work with Palestinians in the West Bank, to work with non-governmental organizations like the Red Cross, and to work with organizations like the UN to make life better for those Palestinians who are not involved in the conflict.
That's incredible.
So I think you'll really be excited to meet Chen Mazzig.
Yeah. All right, good to meet you.
I'll stand up for all the expectations that have been built here. Thank you for having me, guys. Good morning, and it's a pleasure being here. I just arrived to Seattle a few weeks ago, and it's been an interesting time this couple of weeks. As Rob said, I just got out of the Army after almost 5 years of service. I'm a lieutenant, a reservist. I served in the West Bank, in Ramallah, in Hebron, in Jerusalem. in a unit that's called COGAT. It's Coordinator of Government Activities in the Territories. This unit is basically responsible for making sure that the Palestinians on the other side, the Palestinians that are not involved in the conflict, will not be affected by the conflict, and to minimize the effect of the conflict on them, I would say.
Wow.
Help them build their own functioning society, sustainable society, that will lead one day to a country that can, function as a real country. So it was really interesting time for me in the West Bank, and this is what I came here. I came here to share my story. I'm just 23 years old, and I think it can be more easier for me to connect to students in universities, and I actually had some experiences. One that I want to share with you guys. I just arrived to Seattle. It was the first week that I was here, and I'm getting an email saying that there's a speaker coming here to Seattle to speak about a new movie that is nominated for the best documentary movie in the Academy Awards, in the Oscar. And this movie called, the movie named 5 Broken Cameras, and it's a movie that shows, I watched the movie myself several times, and it shows one perspective of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the Palestinian side, how, it's well edited, and they're showing one side. They're just showing the responses of the IDF to the attack, of the Israeli Defense Force to the attacks of the Palestinians in the nonviolent demonstration, as they describe it. And the speaker is coming here. It was an initiative of SUPER, Students Unite for Palestinian Equal Rights, and the Jewish Voice for Peace, which to me sounds like a great organization. I support Palestinian equal rights, and I'm a Jewish Voice for Peace, I would say. But just reading the description of the speaker was a bit problematic, because he's talking about nonviolent demonstrations, and when I was in the West Bank, I was part of these demonstrations on the Israeli side, trying to intermediate between the Palestinians to the IDF, to the Israeli Defense Force, and try to calm down the Palestinians and explain them that the way of discussing about the issues would be the path to achieve their goals. So I looked up the name of the speaker that is coming here, and when I saw one of his pictures, and I was blown away, because when I was 18 years old, a young Israeli soldier, just getting into the field, I was called to one of the nonviolent demonstrations, as they describe it, because I speak Arabic. We've been trained in my unit to speak Arabic so we can communicate better with the Palestinians. So when I was 18, I met him the first time, and he shoved me to the ground in one of the nonviolent demonstrations. In the same demonstration, actually, a good friend of mine got hit by a stone. They threw stones at us, and they broke the jaw.
How big were these stones?
Yeah, you probably think we're talking about little stones, but it's rocks. It's really big.
And they call that
rocks.
nonviolent.
And for them, it's nonviolent. I think it's something about the culture, but for us, it is violent. And as I said, a friend of mine, they broke the jaw of a friend of mine, and another fellow IDF soldier a few years ago lost his eye because of a stone that was thrown at him. So for me, it was a bit, I felt like I need to be there to share my story, and I thought, the Jewish Voice for Peace and Students United for Palestinian Equal Rights would probably want to listen to it, right? Little did I know, because when I arrived there, I listened to an hour and a half of lies from this speaker. I can say that it's lies because I was there and I saw everything, and the things that he was describing are far from the reality by clear mile. He was talking about settlements with pool and settlements with malls, and
pools
and I was, I've been around settlements, and there's
I have too.
Yeah, there are some malls in Ramallah and in Hebron, but I never in the Palestinian side,
right.
not in the settlement side. So I waited patiently. Then he showed some video clips of soldiers getting hit by stones and soldiers falling down. Israeli soldiers being, fell down by stones that are throwing at them, and the crowd was cheering.
Right here in Seattle, the crowd was cheering when the Israeli soldiers were getting hit by rocks.
Amazing. In an event that was arranged again by the Students United for Palestinian Equal Rights in University of Washington and the Jewish Voice for Peace. They need to be a voice for peace, right? So I waited patiently. I didn't stood up. It was a horrible experience for me to sit there and watch my friends getting hit by stones, and the crowd is cheering. It was 50 people, about 50 people sitting there. So at the end, the speaker, Iyad Burnett, he's the brother of the director of the 5 Broken Cameras movie. He opened the floor for questions. I raised my hand, really patiently waited for everyone else to ask their questions, and then I stood up when he gave me the floor, and I asked, Iyad, do you remember me? He said no. Obviously, I didn't expect him to remember me. And I told him the story that when I was 18, we met the first time. I was a young Israeli soldier in the IDF, and he shoved me to the ground. So I wanted to know, how do you describe this demonstration as nonviolent if you shoved me to the ground? I had a photo of 5 Palestinians holding rocks in their hands and some photographers taking a picture of that. And I opened it and I said, you know, this is from your group. I couldn't even finish my sentence, and a 20-year-old guy stood up in the crowd. He had a shirt of Free Palestine, of the Students United for Palestinian Equal Rights, the super movement. He stood up and he started screaming at me and saying, take this Zionist, was cursing me and swearing the most horrible curses I ever heard. And he said, take him out of the room. I'm glad that this is what happened to your friends. I'm glad that I broke their jaw, and I wish that you would have been dead or something like that. It was really horrifying. You know, it reminded me of the same demonstrations that I took part of in the West.
But here you're in Seattle, and you're almost being verbally attacked and almost physically attacked.
Exactly, and then he started to charge towards me really, you know, aggressively and saying, Seattle is weak, Seattle is weak. We need to respond to this guy. We need to take him down, and someone needs to take him out of the room.
And you hardly said anything.
The Jewish Voice for Peace, the Students United for Palestinian Equal Rights. This is how they behave. And I was shocked. I tried to calm him down. I said, I'm here to discuss with you guys. This is exactly the way that I don't want to go through. This is exactly my point. I don't want to go through that. He couldn't care less. He came on to me and he tried to assault me. I just went out of the room because I didn't want to get into a fight. I got enough fight in the 5 years that I was in the West Bank. Got, you know, shoved down to the ground many times. So then I left the room, and after I left, I met with one guy from the room that told me this story that after I left, there was an old lady in the crowd, Israeli, and a Israeli guy that was there. When I was talking, actually, he told me in Hebrew, keep on talking, like, don't stop. He obviously was Israeli as well. And after I left, apparently this old lady, the Israeli lady, asked the other guy in Hebrew, the Israeli guy, to stay in the room with her because she was afraid and she wanted to ask a question. So after I left, apparently she asked, you know, this guy that was just here, that was just went out of the room was right because I saw soldiers falling down, and I want to know, why do you call it nonviolent? The 20-year-old kid that just attacked me is now coming towards her, and he's approaching her, an old lady, Israeli lady, and he's going to attack her. So the Israeli guy is standing between them too, and he's swinging his camera. He had a camera with him to protect her, and he's actually breaking the camera on the 20-year-old guy that was just attacking us, which was pretty pleased about it. He said, hey, you see, you broke your camera. So that makes six broken cameras. But for me, it was shocking to see that. I came to Seattle, you know, I had some better experiences in the West Bank with people that disagree with me.
Yeah, that Americans would think that way.
Yeah, so, you know, I'm into discussion. That's what I think, that the only path, and this is why I like Stand With Us so much, and this is why I feel so connected to this organization. They know that the way to peace and the path for peace would come only through discussion and only through speaking about the hard problems. And I wish that, you know, that these people would really engage in the conversation and really would like to hear my side. I'd love to hear.
Well, let me ask you this then. Again, just like with John Winchester in the first segment, if there are colleges or even high schools that would like to have you come and speak, are you willing to go to any colleges or high schools or events in this area? Maybe there's people that are watching that love Israel, and they're upset at the media bias, and they want you to come and speak at their high school or colleges. Could they contact Stand With Us Northwest or you?
Yeah, I would love to do it. I would love to come and speak, and, you know, we'll go far. We'll go far. Just tell us where you are and we'll get there. You can get online to standwithus.com, and there's a contact information there, and you can contact us. We are Stand With Us Pacific Northwest. We even have a page on Facebook. You can like us there. And for me, it's really, you know, going through this experience. I didn't know what I was getting into.
Welcome to Seattle.
Yeah, you know. But now I'm more enthusiastic about it. I feel that I have so much more to do, and I'm looking forward.
You know, your approach is so much different, and in the next segment, when we get with John Winchester and yourself, he is essentially doing the same thing that you're doing, only it's on the flip side of the coin. So it'll be interesting to hear how you two can dialogue together about how to approach the campus and how to bring the knowledge of Israel to a very positive light. You know, as we're going to close this segment in just a minute and hear a song, I think of the biblical accounts of Abraham, which we're all familiar with, and Abraham's hospitality. But that Abraham's tent, Sarah's tent, the tent flap was always open. And your approach being an approach of hospitality and peace, where you're confronted with something very, very different. And I'm sure that that's what we'll get a chance to talk about, and how to see these two things fused in the next segment.
Yes, I'm just so glad that you're here and that Rob Jacobs is here with Stand With Us Northwest, and in bringing you here. That's why I think Stand With Us Northwest is such a fantastic organization, and they're proactive. You know, they like to be at the forefront of things, you know, like the point of the spear, leading the charge. And I believe that the Christian community all over Washington needs to stand with Us Northwest and fight all the media bias. At this time, we're going to hear another beautiful song by Sarah Sanders, and it is called You Alone Are God.
Your great story unfolds, majesty. History will show your glory. Heaven and earth will know, so do we. As we dwell in the shadow of your wings, we lift your praises high. Neighbor
Well, welcome back. I'm Pastor Art Palecek with El Shaddai Ministries here in Tacoma, Washington, and I'm with our senior pastor, Pastor Mark Biltz. And those of you that are watching, we want to let you know that we certainly do believe in prayer. And just like we heard in the song, you alone are God. God does hear your prayer. Pastor Mark, we have something that's coming up that's very exciting, that's really common to both of us. You want to talk about that, what's happening at El Shaddai in March?
Sure. Toward the end of March, and you can go to our website at lshaddaiministries.us and find out more about it. We're going to be holding a Passover Seder at the Tacoma Convention Center, and we just want to welcome anyone if they want to help connect with the Jewish people to attend our Passover Seder. We'll be doing Sunday night, March 24th. And I'm really excited about that. But at this time, let's go back to our two illustrious young men here who are both, trying to reach this next generation and fight all the bias in the media. We have John Winchester and Chen Mazzig, and we're just so glad both of you are here with us.
Thank you for having us. Thank you for having us.
It's interesting that it's both that you both have a common element coming from two different worlds, and so to speak, but yet you have a same common goal. And probably what we'd like to hear about is some of the challenges that we heard about one challenge here that Chen just had, but there are very similar challenges that you have as well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, coming from the Christian community, our involvement in what is described as pro-Israel activism is a little bit different. I remember I went to Columbia University in New York, Manhattan, and I was attending an event we were having there that night, but it was during Apartheid Week, and I'd mentioned that earlier. And there was people who are supportive of Palestinian movements that were out on their main quad area, and I just wanted to watch. I just wanted to watch and see what was happening. And as I was standing there, they had a mock apartheid wall or security barrier out, and there was, free Palestine, no peace without justice, all these kinds of things. And I was just standing there, and a young man comes up to me, and I had not engaged anyone. I didn't know anyone. He came up to me, stuck his hand in my face, and said, "The only reason you support Israel is because you're Jewish." Well, the irony is rich, right? I could have laughed, and I could have said, I'm not Jewish, so you're totally wrong. But then I thought about the reality of his statement, is that if support for Israel is relegated to such a small community, and we as Christians, especially on college campuses where the fight is, if we don't raise our voice and lend our support to the advancement of something that is so right. There are very few things in our lives that we face that are so black and white. And this is one of those. There's not a lot of gray here. And if we don't lend our voice to that, and it's relegated to just a Jewish issue, we have done a serious injustice to the things that we say we believe in, the God that we are supposed to be serving. But we've also alienated people that we are supposed to be close to. And that really inspired me, because I came at this from probably a traditional view of most evangelical Christians. I was raised to be pro-Israel. We pray for the peace of Jerusalem every Sunday. We during the festivals and during the holidays, we have an Israeli flag in our church up on the stage. But that was the extent. It was more a sentimental hug or something to the Jews and to Israel. But that was the extent of it, and this made it a reality for me. It was very close to the very beginning of when I started with CUFI. And it really brought it home that there was a fight on campus and that Christians needed to stand up instead of letting the Jewish voice be the only one be heard.
You just shared an incident before the program started with me about you were on a campus, I don't recall which one, and you had certain supporters with you, students, and then there was a Jewish organization as well, or there were Jewish people that were going to be a part of that, and how many showed up and so on, and
sure,
what the outcome of that was.
Absolutely.
What we'd like to hear about. What happens when you're there?
What happens? I mean, I attended, at that point I was in graduate school. I was in my total college career was 8 years, and I was at the end of my graduate career. I didn't know it, but I was at the end of it. It was before God moved me into working with CUFI. I never had done a pro-Israel event on campus really at all. And I had gone to the Hillel and told them I started a chapter for Christians United for Israel on this campus. I'm talking to the executive director of the Hillel, and I said, and I'm here to do pro-Israel stuff on your campus. And she didn't have a clue what to do with that. She looked at me and she said, okay. And that was it. It was a very short conversation. And leaving, but I said, leaving, before I left, I said, anything you need from me, we'll try to help you. It took about a week, and there was some, it was Apartheid Week had showed up. They put a anti-Israel boycott, divestment, sanction Israel article in the newspaper. And so I got a phone call saying, we're going to go down and protest. How many people can you bring? Can you bring as many as possible? And so I thought, well, I did my best to bring as many people down as possible, and I got about 30 people who had agreed to go down. And we went down there, and I thought, oh, we're such a small group. You know, there's not so many of us. I hope it's impactful enough. And we went down to protest at that newspaper. And when we showed up, there was about 10 Jewish students and us, and they were so really galvanized the relationship that we were going to have from that point on. Because all of a sudden they had a realization, hey, we're not in this alone. We don't have to do this by ourselves. And it galvanized. The relationship really has never been the same.
I think that's so important for the Jewish community to realize they're not alone. That there are, you know, people out there who love Israel, support Israel, and it's not just the warm fuzzies. You know, some churches just have old warm fuzzies, they love Israel, but there's no backbone. There's no actual physical support. And we always want to let the Jewish people know that we support them. But the thing that may be confusing, Ken, that you might be able to clear up with some people that are listening, is like when he talks about the Jewish voice for peace. Well, how do you, it seems like sometimes you struggle even with the Jewish voice for peace. So what's happening within the Jewish community itself that you can help Christians understand?
First, I want to say that it's amazing to have this support, that we don't need to stand alone. And this is something that, for me, to be an Israeli and knowing that there's people like you and people like El Shaddai that are really supporting us and physically and being proactive about it. That, you know, I couldn't be more thankful and appreciating it. There's a long way between being warm and fuzzy and saying, yeah, I love Israel, to really be proactive and help and support. And that's why I salute you guys. So talking about the Jewish community, I think that, you know what, this is what's very unique about it, that we can have different type of opinions. You can have organizations that are really supporting Israel, and you can have organizations like Jewish Voice for Peace that don't want Israel to exist as the state of the Jewish people.
That's another topic in itself.
Yeah, it is. You know, going there to that event that I was mentioning, it was, for me, it was just to try to talk to them and try to engage in a conversation with them. What I saw is that they're not intended to have to talk to anyone like me. Yeah, they even wrote an article about the things that I've done, and that, you know, saying bad things about me that are far from the reality. I never killed anyone. I'm not a pro-occupation or those things, and it's really hard. And what really makes me stand up tall is that I know that there's people like you that really support us, and I hope that, you know, the Jewish Voice for Peace one day would like to have a conversation and talking to us and just hear us out. We just want to talk.
Well, you know, you've only been here, you say, about 3 weeks. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, even though you've had a pretty busy schedule, mm-hmm. You're going to have even a busier schedule. And we know from the Shaliach that was here before you, Ron Bar Yehoshaphat, mm-hmm. That we were active with him, and we saw some films that he was involved at several of the colleges in Puget Sound, and we were shocked at the violence in just the meetings that he attended in bringing forth a non-violent message. And both of you are experiencing the same thing. So how do you see, how would you combat that, or how would you deal with that from this point on, now that this was your initiation into Puget Sound?
I think we have a lot to deal with. It's not only the Jewish Voice for Peace. I wish, because there are, you know, we can talk to them and we can figure it out. The BDS movement that you just mentioned, they're starting to pop up, and we don't feel them because, you know, they're going through the media and they have like articles and going through the newspapers, going to the TV programs, and broadcasting hate against Israel. We don't even feel it. It's, you know, it's the nuance that you can't read sometimes. Yep. And they're going through the Congress, and they're going through lobbying and trying to affect the representative of America to change their mind. And they're going through the colleges, and they have movements in the colleges, and they have the super, and it's like a snake that is just going around a lot of things, and it's going to struggle us, and it's going to, you know, we won't be able to breathe at the end, and it's around us. But this is why it's so important that they are so strong, and Israel is not really, you know, we are trying our best to do advocacy, but we're a really small country. People don't understand it.
You know, talk a little bit about it. And I know you did talk about this when you were at our congregation, but the actual content of your message, because you were there as you had, and of course John's been to Israel a number of times, but you grew up in Israel, and you were in the midst of that conflict, and you saw things happening. What is the message that you try to communicate? Because the media is not biased, is it? Media is just a little bit biased, but why do we have such negative information, and how do you combat that information by talking about what's happening in Israel? Now, John, being an American and being in the States, he sees it when he visits, but you were there. So what is it that you promote about Israel to bring their attention to what's really going on to combat the negative information?
First of all, they're saying the apartheid wall that surrounds the West Bank. It's just security fence, actually, and it's only 4% of it is a wall. I don't know how it turned out to be a wall, but and this 4% of a wall is just to protect from snipers, because in the past, snipers from the West Bank used to shoot into Israeli cities on the other side. So 4% of a wall, 96% of security fence, just like there is a security fence between the states to Mexico. You know, sometimes countries, even countries that get along pretty good, have security fence between them to protect their borders. So that's one thing. But then let's go to the apartheid term that they're using. What is an apartheid?
That's good.
Yeah, people need to search. You know, when I'm asking them, when I say an apartheid wall, I'm asking them, what is an apartheid? Can you define the apartheid term for me? Because apartheid is something that has been used in South Africa, and it's not, you know, it's far from being what Israel is practicing, because we have a Supreme Court judge that is Arab, and we have, you know, Arab people they have more rights than I do, actually, as an Israeli Jew, because they don't have to join the army or do the national service. They can go directly to university after, you know, when they turn 18. So this is not a good apartheid, I would say.
That's right. That's right. That's right. I mean, what Chen is talking about is absolutely true. A lot of people who have never been to the region have no idea really what's happening. They've shouldered a cause that is really fictitious. And I remember being at Northern Arizona University, and their Students for Justice in Palestine were having their apartheid week, and they had all of this stuff up. And I began discussing, just having a dialogue with them about apartheid, what apartheid is, settlements and things like that, and their level of knowledge was minuscule. And it's so small, but what they've done is they've taken the slogans, which sound so right and sound so good, and that's what they're promoting, and they think it speaks for itself. What more information do you need that other than Israelis are herding Palestinians like cattle and keeping them in cages and things like that? What more do you need? And when you get to the root of it, you begin to realize that there's no foundation on this discussion, and so we can bring a level of education to really dismantle it. If we can find I think our most difficult job is finding the audience.
You know, you talked about the wall, because we've seen the wall, we've been around it, and we know, especially Pastor Mark knows firsthand as far as snipers are concerned, going into Hebron and some of these other places. But you've even said it too, and you may want to comment on that, is that what happened if those things happened to us here in the States? Say here in Vancouver or in Mexico, if they shot rockets, and you want to comment on that and your daily life in Israel, so that these students can understand that, hey, it's not the piece of cake that you might think it is.
Yeah. A lot of times I'm talking about the number 13,000. 30,000 rockets has been shot from Gaza from 2006.
That's amazing.
You say 13 or 30? 13,000 rockets. That's incredible.
You know, I'm trying to really explain people how it is to live under a rocket threat, and what does this big number mean. And you know, having, in average, is every 15 minutes a rocket. Try to imagine how it is to get every 15 minutes an alarm going on, and then you need to run to your shelter, get covered, and then pray to God that this time it's not you, and this time the rocket won't hurt you. And I'm always saying, like, try to think, you know, if Vancouver Island would come up one day and start shooting rockets towards Seattle, how many rockets do you think it will take until America would respond? Do you think that after the 5th rocket there would still be a Vancouver Island? Because, you know, Israel has not retaliated only after 8,000 rockets, and then we retaliated, but, you know, again, pinpoint strikes, trying to minimize the effect on the civilian population with my unit, again, 100 of soldiers and officers, taking care of the humanitarian aspect of the conflict. So for me, it's just, it's really, I don't know, I think people are trying to find common ground with the Hamas, with the terrorist organization in a way, because we pulled out from the Gaza Strip in 2005.
Right.
A few months after that, the Hamas, the terror organization, gained control over the Gaza Strip and started to say that, you know, they need to kill all the Jewish people. And it's not just that the civil rights of the Jewish population in Gaza has been hurt after their pullout from Gaza. Also, the Christian population that lived in Gaza, the Palestinians, you know, we had shuttles going from Gaza to Bethlehem just a few weeks ago for the Christmas Mass. And they begged to stay in the West Bank. They told us, please don't send us back, because they're killing us back there. They're throwing us out of roofs. And soon there won't be ancient Christian population in the Gaza Strip, because the Hamas is controlling that. The Hamas that was chosen by the Palestinians in Gaza. So the message for me is just a message of peace, and I wish that they would adopt it too.
Well, the thing that amazes me is I lead tours to Israel, and I've been to Israel, and I don't go to your typical places. I like to go to Sderot. Okay, this is right next to the Gaza Strip that is on the leading edge of receiving a lot of these rockets. And what amazes me is how the media doesn't report what's happening correctly, because Hamas purposely targets school kids. Talk about human rights violations. Israel goes out of their way to warn the civilian population, dropping leaflets, calling on their cell phone, texting them, hello, we're coming, please leave, you know. And yet they're always accused of human rights violations, whereas Hamas purposely targets the civilian community. And not only that, they wait for school to get out so they can time it when the kids are leaving school. And that's not really portrayed as far as what's reality.
No.
Well, I think what the other side is trying to do is they're waging a PR war only. I don't think Hamas thinks that they're going to militarily overtake Israel, but they're waging a war on a totally different field. And because you're right, they fire at Sderot, but there's a military base, if I'm not mistaken, the same distance from Gaza. And the safest place in southern Israel to be is on that military base when the rockets start going off, because they don't fire at the military base. And these kinds of, but there are people who would advocate, well, Hamas is under pressure. You know, Israel's putting the squeeze on them, and they're acting out of desperation. What kind of desperation would lead somebody to target women and children and civilians in a war? But they're not fighting a war of any kind other than of military kind, but they're trying to fight a war of public relations, and so that it'll affect the West. And they're trying to diminish support, mainly in the United States, because it's nearly gone in Europe. They're targeting the United States and Western media to turn their back on the state of Israel. That is the goal. That is where the war is.
Well, you know, John, Ken has he's had a certain approach on how he's beginning his tenure here. You have been involved in this for quite a while on campuses, and we may have college students that are watching today. How do you approach students on campus relative to supporting Israel? It's because it's not as firsthand as somebody who's lived in Israel, but because of your heart and solidarity, how do you communicate that same message from the other side of the coin?
Well, thank you very much for asking that question. if they're, for those young people or parents or grandparents or neighbors, or if you know college students, please call the station. The number is at the bottom of the screen, and they'll put you in touch with us. You can go to CUFI.org for more information as well. But what I try to do is I work through a number of networks. First of all, and first and foremost being pastors. We are Christians United for Israel. And much of the work that I do is trying to network through churches, because I believe that I am the same as a lot of other young people coming out of churches. I believe religiously and spiritually about the nation of Israel and who they are and the relationship that they have with God, and therefore the relationship that's required of us. And operating from that, I didn't do a whole lot. And so I like to work with pastors, because it took my pastor to kick me out of the nest, to get me involved. I was involved in a lot of things, but I wasn't involved in this. This is like, we think it's an elective. It's something we can decide to do if we're in school. But I don't think it is. I think it's something, having been involved with this now for almost 4 years, supporting Israel has become the embodiment of all of the other things that I believe about my God. And to decide that I'm not going to take that one, but I'll worry about the others, can I really do that? And so I work with a lot of pastors to get them, because pastors exercise a tremendous amount of authority over their parishioners. Right. And their young people respect them. They look up to them for leadership and for teaching. And if I can get pastors if I can work with pastors, right, that generally 9 times out of 10 makes my job very easy in terms of recruiting. How I work on campus, though, is I try to get them to work within the Christian community on campus, through the networks on campus. They've got to do the hard work of going door to door, having a cup of coffee with somebody from a class that they're taking, or from another group on campus that they're doing, and saying, hey, look, we're setting up an event of information and about the misinformation concerning Israel. Why don't you come? Why don't you bring some friends? We'll have some pizza or something, and we'll go. That's a typical way. There's other ways, but that is the strongest way, building relationships with other people on campus.
Not only... Well, I was just going to say, I think that's what's so important, and that's why I'm so glad Randy Neal and Christians United for Israel is bringing pastors to Israel to fight the misinformation. Because when I was there this last time, in November, In-State wrote, people don't hear the truth. Israeli electric company supplies the electricity to the Gaza Strip.
That's right.
Okay, and here in Gaza, from the Gaza Strip are coming all these missiles, right? Guess what? The power went out to a section of Gaza Strip while I was there.
That's right.
So the Israeli electric company is going to restore the power to the people who are firing rockets, and guess what? They had to have a crane with a gigantic concrete barrier, because the people from Gaza would shoot them while they're trying to restore and give them the power back.
That's kind of shooting the horse you're riding on.
That's
right. People just do not see
and
what
Egypt
is going
refused to send fuel into Gaza during that period.
I was just visiting the Gaza Strip a few weeks ago before I came here, and I went on the checkpoint where the trucks are going. There's trucks going in and out, and I remember reading in, I think it was BBC or CNN, or maybe even The Guardian, it's one of the newspapers, saying that Israel is limiting the number of goods getting into the Gaza Strip, and and I saw some trucks getting in. I saw one truck that says like jacuzzis. And
jacuzzis.
I don't have a jacuzzi at home. I have to tell you that.
But the Gaza Strip does.
But the Gaza Strip they have it. And one that was saying. LG, it's like a TV company.
LG TV.
LG, and it says The Good Life. And I thought, that's ironic, it's getting into the Gaza Strip. And then I'm reading this thing that we are limiting the number of calories that we give each citizen. I'm like, it was shocking for me, yeah. And just to comment to what you said, I spoke to a lot of Palestinians during my military service, and one of the seniors in the Palestinian Authority, when I had a conversation with him, he told me, Chen, you know what? You can beat us in any war we'll get in with you. You are powerful, and you have the support of, you always win. We don't know why, but you always win. But there's one war that we are going to beat you in, and this is the war on public opinion. A senior PA, Palestinian Authority official said that, and I think they know how to do it, and they know how to fight with us. And it's really easy to be passionate to hate something and to hate a country, yes. And it's really hard to go and stand like you, John, and like you guys, standing with someone that is being attacked. So it's amazing. Again, thank you so much. I don't know if I can really express
You know, I do
it.
want to comment and key off of that. We have a few minutes that are left, because you talked about the spiritual element, and there's a secular element as well.
Sure.
And that is that Israel, we have interest in Israel in the sense of what Israel has given to the world.
That's right.
And you would know that firsthand as well, because that's where you grew up.
Go ahead and pray.
And no, that's going to be you. But on a closing note, do you have any comments about that? What Israel actually contributes besides the Bible itself?
We got 30 seconds.
Israel is developing all the time. It's amazing to see how Israel has developed in 60 years. We have more Nobel Prize per capita than any other country in the world. We have, you know, leading the technology effort. Intel is started in Israel. You know, emails was started in Israel. The high tech is going through Israel, and Israel is believing in progress. I think this is the message eventually, looking at how much Israel has progressed through this 60-something years, and just understanding that we want peace. And this is the main purpose of Israel, to have peace with our neighbors and keep on progressing and helping the world.
Well, we thank both of you for coming. It's been an exciting program, and Pastor Mark,
having us.
Yes, thank you so much. We're just really thrilled to have both John Winchester and Chen Mazzig here with us today, because I know there are going to be a lot of people that are watching that either go to school, they're in school, or their parents or kids who are in school, and they want to fight all this bias that's out there against Israel. And so it's just real. I'm just so glad that you guys are here to present reality, the truth. Because as you said, the enemy, so to speak, and by enemy, I guess I just mean those people that are just totally violent, those that are against Israel, they need to know that we will come back and refute with comments and with truth. That's what I appreciate about Israel, is how, you know, they're not always there to crush the Palestinians, as the media says. They want peace. And to think here, Ken, you were in the IDF for 5 years, and your whole goal was to make life nice for the Palestinians. Right. And you just don't hear that. You don't hear that in the media.
That's right.
Nope. Not at all.
Well, we certainly want to thank our viewers for watching, and certainly learning about Israel is not something to be shy about. Because as I mentioned when I opened the program, is that all of the Bibles that you read were written by Jewish people. The prophets were all Jewish, and the very faith that we have is based in our Hebrew roots. So it's nothing to be shy about, and we're glad that you were able to watch today, and there's maybe something else that you can learn and take to your community, to your family, to your students, because we believe in one God.
That's right. And to me, it's just exciting to be able to be here with you guys and allow you to share to the TV audience at Trinity Broadcasting Network the truth. And we are for you. And at this time, we'd like to close with prayer. And so we're asking you now to, may you also pray for the nation of Israel.
And our young people.
Definitely. Pray for the students. But let's close with prayer. Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King, we just thank you so much. You are truly the creator of the heaven and earth. We thank you for everything that you're doing in our midst. And I just pray right now that the Christian community would walk side by side with the Jewish community, yes, and realize that we truly are one and we serve the same God.